Hello there. In 2019, me and some buddies teamed up and started to create an interconnected fictional universe revolving around lore, myth, tales, and legends, and ultimately third-person works written by me, mostly. These works span from 50,000 plus word manuscripts to the most minuscule of short stories, all highly interconnected and woven in to an overarching plot. We called this universe The Crown. I intend to integrate this universe, mentioning it more and more, into my YouTube channel here on this platform, as well as into my email list. But for now, the occasional short story narration, as this video is, and shoutouts and examples in writing videos and advice, which you should take with a grain of salt, will have to do. The following video is a narration of a short story written by me in this universe, The Crown, also narrated by me. It deals with themes of loss, grief, rebirth, rebuilding, and ultimately restoration. I hope you enjoy.
The Memorium, written and performed by Xavier Schwindt. The light sprinkle of rain ceased to fall as the weary traveler made his way into town. The clouds began to part as he walked the cobblestone streets that led inwards. The man walked with a slight limp, as if from a wound inflicted long ago. He was dressed plainly, but obtained an air of royalty. His face was kind, but looked rather sad and faintly haunted. As he neared the city center, people began to notice him as they went about their early morning business. They would spot the poppy upon his garment, stitched in with golden thread, its only adornment, and bow or salute respectfully. The man would acknowledge them, but continue on his way, determined to reach the city's center before the sun rose fully into the sky. He began to draw nearer the city's heart, and as he did, the man spotted a young girl, still rubbing her eyes after a good night's rest. She smiled at the man, and he beamed back, the haunted sad look gone for that instant. The girl blushed slightly and rushed, giggling to her mother inside a nearby house. The haunted sad look returned to the man's face, but slowly held at bay by the thought that that little girl might live a happy, peaceful life. He pressed onwards, on into the city's midst. He knew what its heart would be, and that its blood would be its occupants. The sun began to shine, and the man reveled in the new life of spring that breathed and grew all around him. There must always be a spring, he thought as he spotted his destination, a stone wall spanning several acres looming up within his path. The man skirted the wall, following it to a polished steel gate. The gate shone in the early morning light and was slick with rain from the drizzle. The water droplets slowly gathered together, rolling over the intricately carved leaves and vines of steel. He paused briefly to admire the gate. Every new city's memoriam had a unique gate, and this one was skillfully crafted indeed. The gate was nearly 15 feet tall, but its handles were only at the man's shoulders. Just above them were a series of carved words formed out of a jumble of smaller vines. Kortea ka anyatazi. Knock, and it shall be opened. The man smiled as he obeyed the written command. Knocking. He waited until a small click emitted from behind the gate. It swung quietly open to reveal a young man barely out of boyhood, who wore heavy steel armor ornamented with gold sections carved to depict events of the not-so-distant past. The man smiled at the boy, knowing how uncomfortable he must be from experience. He knew the armor was a heavy reminder for the bearer to stand the example set by the men depicted in the stories that weighed it down on the next generation. He passed the young man, who saluted at the sight of the poppy. He now stood on the edge of a lush garden full of brightly colored blossoms and leaves. Though he had not yet looked up, he knew if he did, he would just be able to see the hilt and crossguard of a sword peeking up from high above the treetops. He now looked up and saw just that. The sword was decorated with gold and had an amber gemstone pommel which shone brilliantly in the bright sunlight as the dawn struck it. The man nodded in satisfaction at the choice of blade. This memorium was a good one, as he had been told. It contained at least 500 flourishing trees, and the thought of what that meant brought about more sorrow. The man continued walking towards the memorium's center. He walked lazily, winding paths of stepping stones, and passed under the countless boughs of miniature forests which the memorium contained. He stopped and listened to the many sounds that graced the greenery. He heard the hopeful song of the chirping the birds that flew high overhead. He heard the faint joyous laughter of children at play, the amused tittering laughs of the mothers who watched the children play amid the trees of this new world. This was a true memoriam, a place to remember the dark past and to abide in the bright and present future, and to help those born into it know nothing else. The man sat down upon a block of stone that served as a bench. He sat there for a long moment, reveling in the sounds of the future that he had helped to create. It was marvelous. He had lost sons and most of his brothers, but that sacrifice now allowed the children of now to not experience what he had, and that fact brought about a peace upon his face, a peace near to the peace of a saved death. Coming back to conscious thought, the man rose and continued on his way deeper into the garden. He passed clumps of children at play, groups of young people listening to their teachers, and the occasional man like himself, sometimes talking to one of the armored young men as they strolled through the garden grounds. The man looked up once more and saw the sword looming closer, high above the treetops. The tapering stone pillar the sword rested in also came into view slowly as the man neared. Suddenly the tree ceased and he entered a clearing. At the clearing's center towered the stone pillar and the sword it held. Etched into the pillar were hundreds of names and numbers. The numbers showed which tree each man was buried under or nearby. Sometimes the text simply read, "Soldier," a word showing that an unknown soldier was buried there. The man skimmed the words for a while, looking for those he recognized. He found the names of Taran, Sar, Balar, and Tuad, but knew he had looked over many of the names of his fallen comrades. After skimming the pillar, he stood looking up at the sword, which was buried at its pinnacle. On the first third of the pillar, a string of words round about it. He knew that the words said, and saved his emotion for when he read them. The sun crept higher into the now cloud-free sky. Shadows bent and bowed about him, measurements of time in a timeless moment. A young woman detached from the shadowy path to stand solemnly beside him, as the light faded from the sky and dusk took its grip. The young maiden took his hand and led him to a stone building where he ate alongside many others. The feast was provided as a chance to remember and to rebuild, to tell tales and to forget what you wish you had never remembered. That night he slept in a comfortable room in a Memorium guest house. In the morning, he woke to find a small basket already packed for the next leg of his wanderings. In the basket, he found food, water, and a small bread knife. The knife he removed, setting it on the bedside table as he left. He wanted no reminders of his past on this next leg of his journey. He thanked his volunteering host and walked the short distance back to the Memorium center and the stone pillar. He walked slowly around the pillar, then read the large words that round about it in time with his hobbling stride. Those we tread upon in light fought in darkness. They rose for us, they stood for us, they fell for us. Remember them in laughter and love and action. Remember them, for when we join them we shall have comrades. And we'll sing together once more the ancient tongues, both together in light. The light you must now sustain, the light that chased the darkness that you must remember. Remember. The man finished reading and walked away, overflowing with 1,000 emotions for the world that it was his job to rebuild.